In this video, I'm going to help you understand how much housing that you can afford based on your salary. And I'll walk through 3 different salary ranges. Now, mortgage rates were as low as 2.65% in 2020 and jumped all the way up to 7.8% in 2023. Today, as I'm shooting this video on March 2026, rates are hovering at about 6%. All that means is that the loan that you're going to get today will be significantly more expensive than the loan that you would have gotten in 2020. And that's because for every $100,000 that you borrow, you're going to be spending another $300 a month just on interest. Now, when it comes to buying a home and figuring out what you can actually afford, there's generally 2 personal finance principles that you would go off of. The first is just what kind of payment that you would qualify for in the eyes of the lender. This is known as the 28 and 36 rule. Now, the other personal finance rule is designed to help you understand what it is that you can actually afford. And this rule is the 30-33 rule. Personally, I think the 30-33 rule is a little bit dated, and I'm going to show you the tweaks that I would make to that based off of the current housing landscape. But I'll talk about that one in a minute. Let's start by talking about the 28 and 36 rule. The 28 and 36 rule simply states that your monthly payment cannot exceed 28% of your gross income. So let's say that you make $100,000 per year. You would take your gross monthly income of $8,333 a month, and that would get you about $2,333 a month. This is what you would technically qualify for. Now, at $60,000 per year, you would take that $5,000 per month, multiply it, and you would end up being able to technically qualify for $1,400 per month. And at $180,000 per year or $15,000 per month, you'd be able to qualify for $4,200 per month. This is the first part of the rule. The other part of the rule is the 36. So what this is saying is that your monthly payment and any minimum debt payments that you owe cannot exceed more than 36% of your gross income. Now, this is all that it takes to get approved, but it's important to remember that about 1/3 of Americans are considered house poor right now. And typically that's because they're focusing on buying a home that they can qualify for, not a home that they can actually afford. So let's talk about what they actually could afford. The reality is the bank only cares about whether or not you can make the payment. They don't care that if you make the payment, you're going to be completely broke for the rest of the month. They just want to make sure that you're not going to default on the loan, which means that they don't care if you're contributing to a 401k. They don't care if you have enough money to build up an emergency fund or even just enjoy your money. Now, on the topic of affordability, let's talk about the 30-33 rule, and I'll also cover what my adaptation is to that rule. The first 30 just refers to not spending more than 30% of your gross income on your monthly payment. And this is the part of the rule that you're going to see the biggest impact by mortgage rates. When rates were 3%, you could get a $500,000 home for about $2,100 a month. Whereas today, with a 6% rate, focusing on a $2,100 a month payment would mean that you could only buy a $350,000 home. Focusing on the 3 different salary ranges, at $60,000, you'd be able to afford a $1,500 a month payment. If you're making $100,000, you'd be able to afford a $2,500 a month payment. And if you were making $180,000 a month, you'd be able to afford a $4,500 a month payment. Now, a lot of you might be looking at these numbers thinking, $1,500 a month is not going to get me any sort of house where I live. Frankly, $2,500 a month might not be able to get you a house where you live. And I think that's why we're seeing a lot of these alternative cities like Buffalo, Knoxville, Savannah, Georgia, all becoming hot spots. The median home price in Knoxville, Tennessee right now is $350,000, which means that someone making $100,000 could very comfortably afford a home there. Additionally, in all 3 of those cities, there's plenty of starter homes that are under $250,000. Now, the second part of this rule is that you have 30% of the home's price available in cash. That means that for a $300,000 home, you would have $90,000 in cash. And you might think, well, why isn't this 20% or even less? I hear about people buying homes with 3.5% down. This rule is designed to help you focus on putting 20% down and then still having 10% as a buffer in cash for emergencies that are definitely going to come up along the way. Basically, making sure that you have a fully funded emergency fund when you buy your home. I know that putting 20% down is a lot, But if you do that, then you would be able to remove PMI or private mortgage insurance, which is a requirement if you have less than 20% equity in the home that you're buying. Private mortgage insurance is basically just insurance for the lender in case you were to stop making payments on the loan. This is usually a small fee that for a $300,000 home would likely run you about $100 a month on top of the mortgage payment. But I understand that saving $90,000 or $150,000 or even more than that while you're renting and dealing with the effects of inflation right now is going to be pretty unrealistic. And it's going to be tempting to try to invest the money while you're saving it because it might take you 3 to 5 years to save that down payment. But I'd highly recommend you just put that money into a high yield savings account just because currently you can get about a 3 to 4% kickback on the money that you put into your high yield savings account, and you really have no idea where the market's going to go in the short term. For every $10,000 that you have saved in a high yield savings account, that means you'd be getting $300 to $400 per year. Now, if you're saving up a $50,000 or a $100,000 down payment, you can imagine that that's actually going to be a pretty significant dividend that you'd be receiving from your bank. Now, the last 3 is just referring to not buying a home that's more than 3x your income. So going back to our numbers, at $60K, that means you wouldn't buy a home that's more than $180,000. $100,000, you wouldn't buy more than $300,000. And at $180,000, you wouldn't buy a home that's more than $540,000. Again, as I mentioned, I think that this is a little bit of a dated rule because the median salary right now is $60,000, but there's not a whole lot of homes out there that are $180,000. In fact, the median home price is $420,000 right now. I mean, I personally live in Austin, Texas, which is considered a slightly less expensive city than like a New York City, an LA, or a San Francisco. And the median home price here is $550,000, which means that none of the people out of these 3 categories would be able to buy a home here. And so as I had mentioned, here's how I would adjust that rule. Instead of focusing on a 30-33 rule, I would adjust this to a 25-24 rule. So no more than 25% of your gross income on a monthly payment. So for $60,000, that would mean not spending more than $1,250 a month. For $100,000, that would mean not spending more than $2,100 a month. And for $180,000, I wouldn't spend more than $3,750 per month. And then you'd want to have 20% of the home's value in cash. I still think that it's really important to have 10% available as an emergency fund. Maybe not 10%, but at least 3 to 6 months expenses, a fully funded emergency fund. Basically, what I'm trying to get at is you don't want to be living paycheck to paycheck when you buy a home. That's incredibly stressful, and you just don't want that on yourself. But I also understand that putting 20% down while renting is probably going to be really hard for most people. And so, in my opinion, I'd actually go with 10% down. And so to make this more realistic, I think that it's reasonable to put 10% down, take the hit on the PMI cost. It's a temporary cost. And as your home appreciates and as you pay the loan down and you have 20% equity in the home, you can go back to your lender and actually appeal to get that pulled off of your loan anyways. I wouldn't go below 10% though. Honestly, it's good to have some equity in your house in case for some reason that you need to sell, and then that way you're not owing money back to the bank when you do sell your home. And lastly, I would recommend not having a purchase price that's greater than 4x your income. 3x would be really great, but that rule was designed right out of the 2008 housing crisis. And since then, the price of homes has doubled and wages have gone up about 50%. So obviously, we need to update our rules considering those facts. The other thing that I would really encourage you to do that's happening a lot in this market is to ask the seller to contribute money towards the closing costs. That way you can use that money to help buy down your rate. This is called a seller buy down or a seller rate buy down. Your agent can definitely help you figure this out. Typically, it costs about 1% of the loan's value in order to buy down the interest rate by 0.25%. There are some limits to what the seller can contribute, but you could probably get them to contribute enough that it would buy down your rate by 1%, which means that right now you'd be able to get a 5% interest rate. Now, this rule might not seem like it's going to make much of a difference, and that seller rate buy down might not seem like it's going to make a lot of movement, but let's talk about how all of this would change housing affordability for you. A person making $60,000 would now be able to afford a $210,000 home. With that 5% interest rate, it would make their monthly payment about $1,250. Plus, they would only have to put down $21,000 instead of putting down $42,000. Now, for the person that's making $100,000, they would be able to buy a $380,000 home and end up with a $2,100 a month monthly payment. And for the person making $180,000, they'd be able to afford a $660,000 home which would leave them with a monthly payment of $3,750 per month. So basically with this framework, they would spend less of their monthly income on housing, they wouldn't have to spend as much time saving up a down payment, and they'd be able to afford a home with a higher home price. Now, I can understand if you're in the $60K salary range, all of this is going to feel very daunting. But I want to encourage you a little bit. If you're someone that's on here watching videos like this on YouTube, you're probably someone that's focused on self-improvement, which means that over time, if you keep developing better habits, you're going to make more money and you're going to be able to save more money too. All these habits tend to compound, and so while you might not feel the difference over the next 6 months, in 3 to 5 years, you're going to be shocked with how much that you were able to save and invest and how much more money that you were able to make every single year. And so best of luck. I hope that this video was helpful.